Holy crap on a cracker. Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 9, Battle of the Bastards. Whoa. What an episode. I mean, it's probably not going to go down in history as one of the most plot-heavy Game of Thrones episodes, and there certainly were no twists in it, and a lot of it was very predictable. But wow, when it comes down to just pure over-the-top fan service and battle scenes, I mean, holy crap. I honestly can't think of a better medieval style battle scene that I've seen on TV or film other than that. You know, perhaps Braveheart, a couple of things in Braveheart. But other than that, really, I can't, unless we're going back to like the 60s, like the El Cid style Charlton Heston big screen epics, perhaps then, but otherwise, I mean, wow, that was just absolutely breathtaking. A breathtaking battle scene, so well thought out. The cinematography, the editing, the sound, and the music, it all came together so incredibly well. Honestly, it's perfection. But let's get into it. So let's not forget Meereen. We finally get to see all three dragons at last on screen, almost full size. Drogon seems to have grown in leaps and bounds over the last, well, this season. And his two brothers finally break out and join him. And Dany has a little bit of a tete-a-tete with Tyrion, and he manages to dissuade her from burning down the slaver cities and salting the earth and basically going mad king on Esteros. It makes you wonder, though, is it genetic? Is she getting the Targaryen madness somehow? I mean, see, the problem with the Targaryens was there was a lot of incest. That's what probably caused the Mad King to go a little bit nutty in the head. But the question is, could it be passed down to Dany as she's growing older, as she's feeling this power, as she finds her place in the world? Is she becoming anything like him? I mean, would the old Dany have considered burning down 2 whole cities just to put the slavers, the masters, in their place? I'm not entirely sure, but luckily Tyrion was there to talk her down and get her to be slightly more diplomatic. I mean, let's face it, she was holding all the cards here now. The dragons had arrived. Not to mention the Dothraki horde. So there really was no reason for her to go on this vengeance cycle and burn the cities down. But you've got to give Peter Dinklage credit where credit's due. I mean, everyone says how he is the standout actor in Game of Thrones. And although he doesn't have a lot to do in this episode, the few bits that he does do are just so well acted. I mean, he is the complete package. His facial expressions, the emotion that's on his face, the small gestures, the way he pats that guy's shoulder when he's on his knees.
Tell your people what happened here. Tell them you live by the grace of Her Majesty. When they come forward with notions of retribution or ideas about returning the slave cities to their former glory, remind them what happened when Daenerys Stormborn and her dragons came to Meereen.
His tone of voice, the warmth in it, it's like, it's just absolutely fantastic. And that's why Tyrion is one of the most beloved characters in Game of Thrones TV show. Grey Worm gets to do a little bit of what he does, takes down a couple of the ambassadors, and then Dany goes and takes her dragons and flames a ship. Now, last episode, everyone was saying, oh, why didn't she go out and take out all the ships in the bay that were attacking the city with Drogon? And it was a fair point. But then when you think about it, after seeing this episode, and Tyrion stating to the Masters, thank you for the Armada, our Queen does love ships. they need the ships. Where else were they going to get them from? People were saying, oh, well, Euron's coming over with 1,000 ships. Yeah, doesn't need them now. Yara and Theon have turned up with 100 ships, so that helps as well. So as Tyrion said, they've probably just about got enough ships to take their armies over to Westeros now, if they want to. But Dany and her 3 dragons burned down 1 ship. Now, there's been a little bit of debate about exactly how powerful Drogon and his brothers are. I mean, we've seen dragons in films, in TV before. Some of them, like Smaug in The Hobbit, or Smaug, however you want to pronounce it, are incredibly powerful and can take down buildings with a single breath of fire and cause explosions, and that sort of thing. We haven't really seen Drogon go full fire breath on anything. He's roasted a man or 2 here and there, but that's about it. But here we see him and his 2 bros hovering above a ship, and Dany tells them to basically inflame it, engulf it in flames, which is what they do. But it seems to take them forever. I mean, basically what it comes down to is they're not much better than a nowadays heavy-powered flamethrower.
Dracarys.
They don't cut through the ship in one blast. It takes all 3 of them a few minutes to sink 1 ship. Now, admittedly, they could probably fly around the attacking fleet and set them all on fire, and that's fine. But to sink them, not so. So I was a little bit underwhelmed. That wouldn't be fair. I mean, we didn't know what to expect from these dragons, and they are obviously very powerful. And if you had them attacking a land army, they could just fly over the troops, sending fire down, and they'd be taking out dozens and dozens of troops in one strafing run. So they are powerful. They are like the Game of Thrones nuclear weapons. But I was a little bit surprised it took 3 of them a few minutes to sink 1 ship. But they did, and that put the point across to the masters. You're going to lose everyone if you don't surrender. And so eventually, after, say, Grey Worm takes down 2 of the masters, leaving that one poor guy on his knees to go back and tell the tale to his fellows about what will happen if they don't side with Dany. But then, as I say, we see Theon and Yara in the throne room talking to Daenerys. And there's definitely a connection there between Yara and Daenerys. 2 strong women. I was talking to my wife about this last night after the episode, and when it comes down to it, Dany hasn't really come across that many strong, independent women since we first saw her in the first season. Most of the time she's spent with the Dothraki or with slaves or slave masters who don't appreciate women, who treat them as submissive, subservient, and look down on them. So she hasn't really ever been in the company of another strong-willed queen. Yara could almost be in her travels so far. So I think this is really the first time. And she appreciates, she respects what she sees in Yara, obviously. And there's that mild flirting going on, which was incredibly fun to watch.
Euron's offer is also an offer of marriage. You see, you won't get one without the other.
And I imagine your offer is free of any marriage demands.
I never demand, but I'm up for anything, really.
Theon gets taken down a few notches by Tyrion, which is only fair. I mean, as Tyrion said, when we last met in Winterfell, you were joking about my height and about dwarves, etc. But I understand things haven't been too good for you lately. So, Tyrion gets in a few jibes there, just to let Theon know that everything's not quite forgotten or forgiven. But it looks like Theon and Yara have joined forces with Daenerys, given their 100 ships over to Daenerys' force, And that's going to be a powerful force to reckon with now. There's one thing I was thinking about. Dany was saying to Yara, you know, if you side with me, if we ally, there'll be no more raiding, no more reaving, no more raping. You've got to, if you come on board with me, those are the rules. That's what you've got to live by. And after a little bit of thought, Yara goes, yeah, okay, we're on for that. How was she going to sell that to her men? She was going to take the crown, or take the throne, the Salt Throne of the Iron Islands, a couple of episodes back, by basically sustaining their lifestyle, their history, the way the Ironborn have always been. So now she's agreed with Dany that there'll be no more of this pirating. She's now got to go back to those 100 ships with her men on them and tell them, well, sorry guys, hey, I know for the last 100 years or whatever, 1,000 years or whatever, this is how we've lived, but that we're not doing that anymore. We're doing it this way. We're going to be peaceful navy, just a peaceful royal navy for Daenerys, and that's how that's going to be. That might be a bit of a hard sell for her, especially if Euron eventually does turn up and says, you know, I'm still living in the old ways. If you want to come back to me, come back to me. But let's face it, Euron's trying to build 1,000 ships when he has no forests, and it would take years to build that many ships anyway, even if he had the workforce and the raw materials, which he doesn't. So how exactly they're going to write Euron back into this story next season, I assume he appears next season, I honestly don't know. There's going to be some real time bending going on, but that's not unusual for Game of Thrones. Time is very fluid on this TV show. People can have babies in what feels like weeks, or they can travel hundreds of miles in what feels like days, and they've only got horses. So, but it was good to see Dany and Yara, Theon and Tyrion together. I really do like that. I like that ensemble. And Dany is pulling around her a very strong, tight council. She's got Dario, who can take care of the land forces, be her like commander. She's got Grey Worm, who's in charge of the Unsullied now. So she's got those two commanders for the land forces. She's got Tyrion, who's proven himself an invaluable advisor on diplomacy and looking after cities and running cities and that sort of thing. She's got Missandei, who can be that voice at her ear, saying, you know, reminding her how she's immortal, how perhaps she should be, you know, slightly more merciful perhaps, because that's Missandei's nature. That's how she is. She's a good person. So she's got these people around her now, this council, and it's going to be interesting to see when they actually leave for Westeros. Will it be next week's episode, the end of season 6? Will that be the last shot, us seeing the ships sailing for Westeros with the dragons flying overhead? Who knows? But that's going to be something to watch for. There were a couple of things that I felt were a little bit odd and out of place. Now, other than the dragons burning that ship, that scene where you see like 10, 15 sons of the Harpy murdering and butchering those innocent civilians outside that gate, and then suddenly the horde of Dothraki turn up, that just felt like it had just been shoved in there just to show the Dothraki are actually still here. We haven't forgotten about them. They are there at the city. But it was like, why just have these 10 poor sons of the Harpy standing outside the gate butchering civilians for no apparent reason? Why they were outside the gate, you know, inside the gate or whatever. There's no way, there was no explanation for this. There's just these 10 poor saps, and then all of a sudden you hear this shrieking and this horde of Dothraki descend on them. And that was just, it just felt a little bit weird and out of place. But equally, another thing I noticed at the beginning of the episode, you see Dany standing on a balcony high up on the pyramid, looking out over the bay, over the harbour, at the ships with their trebuchets and catapults, flinging rocks into her city and flaming rocks into her city. And then, as she's talking to Tyrion, suddenly one of the rocks manages to hit the council chamber where they're standing. Now, we saw how high she was on that balcony when she was looking down at the ships. There is no way one of those ships could have flung a rock that high. It's just not possible. Catapults and trebuchets can fire rocks over battlements, but we saw the battlements way below when they were attacking the town. But to send rocks that high up the pyramid that there would be a threat that they would actually hit that council room? No, I don't think so. I mean, it added a bit of tension, but it wasn't needed. Once again, it was a scene that they could have easily cut and it wouldn't have hurt the scene at all. It wouldn't have hurt the show at all. But let's get down to it now. The Battle of the Bastards, the battle for Winterfell. And it kicks off with the big meeting, the two generals coming together to meet for a bit of a parley. Jon, Sansa, Davos is there, Tormund, and they're facing off with Ramsay Bolton. Small John Umber looked like he was there. Karstarks were there, and that little bit of smack talk, I suppose you could call it, between them before the real battle kicked off the following day. But Jon's idea that he was going to make Ramsay mad by saying, you should fight me one-on-one. We can save all these thousands of men. Us two will fight like in the old ways, and whoever wins, wins the day. Yeah, Ramsay wasn't... I mean, this shows how naive Jon can still be. After all he's been through, north of the wall, fighting at the wall, everything since, he shouldn't be this naive. I mean, okay, fine, he doesn't know Ramsay personally. He hasn't spent any time in Ramsay's company, but he would have heard rumours. I'm sure Davos would have told him something about him. But the fact that he thought he was going to rile Ramsay up, or that perhaps Ramsay would even accept his terms of one-on-one combat, is just ludicrous. I mean, Ramsay sort of, when Jon says to him, "Well, much longer are your men going to fight for you?" and they realise you won't fight for them, Ramsay shouldn't have even started to get worked up by that. But you see on Ramsay's face when he's sort of like, you can see he starts to get mad, but then he just sort of like points at him and goes, "You're good, you're very good."
Will your men want to fight for you when they hear you wouldn't fight for them?
He's good. Very good.
Ramsay's personality, that wouldn't have even scratched the surface. We've seen Ramsay in other situations where he just stays calm, cool, and psychotic. That's who Ramsay is. He's always in control because he doesn't think anyone can beat him. So he wouldn't have got riled up by that. So that was a little bit weird that Jon thought for a second that he would get him mad so that Ramsay would do some seriously crazy thing that would allow him to win the battle. Obviously, in the end, Ramsay flipped that around and did something which made Jon lose the battle. But he did lose the battle. Other than, obviously, the Knights of Arryn coming in at the last minute, which we all knew was going to happen last episode when we saw Sansa right into Littlefinger. That's where the predictability comes in that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. So, that was a bit disappointing. Sansa gets a couple of lines in about how you're going to die tomorrow, Lord Bolton. See you in the morning, and she gallops off. And then that night, the War Council. I mean, once again, Sansa... I was saying last episode of this that Sansa's come a long way, that I actually like her now. And that is true. She has come a long way, and I do like her character much more, than I did at the start of the series. But she still does some... It's almost like they don't entirely know what to do with the character. Is she a Cersei-style character? Is she more of a Catelyn Stark-style character? Is she like a Daenerys that goes between the two? They don't seem to know what to give her to do. She started off as this teenage bitch, basically, who just wanted all the nice clothes, marry a princess, and that was all she wanted. Then she went through a load of shit and slowly began turning into the stronger, more thoughtful, more strategic thinking woman, especially with the time she spent with Baelish. And when she was at the Vale with Baelish, she seemed to be starting to turn into this take control woman. But then recently, this season, she's been making some crappy decisions. I mean, why exactly she hasn't told Jon about the army that Baelish has got, that he offered her when they met at Moldtown, and Baelish said, I've got the army of the Vale, I've got them right here, they're yours, let's talk about this. And she went, nope, don't want anything to do with you, get out. She should have told Jon right then when they were at Castle Black, but she didn't. For whatever reason, we don't know. Will they explain it? If they don't explain why she didn't tell Jon, then it's going to just make her character even more stupid. They've got to give her some reason for this, some reason for not telling Jon. Because when she doesn't tell him again at the War Council, the night before the battle, she is basically sacrificing hundreds, if not thousands of men because she didn't tell Jon about this army. She knew it was there. She rode off and found Littlefinger when he was on his way there and brought them to the battle. So all she had to say to Jon was, look, we don't have to go to battle now. Let's wait 24 hours. And when we do, another 5,000 men will come up on our side and we'll outnumber Ramsay. And Jon would have quite happily said, fine, fantastic, you've got this army coming. I'm just going to sit back here with the rest of my guys. We'll wait. We'll see what happens when they turn up. Then we'll get our plans together. Then we'll attack. But she didn't say anything. So he had to go to battle with the men he had. And she was like saying, oh, we have to wait. We haven't got enough men. He knew he didn't have enough men, but she wasn't giving him any alternatives. He kept saying to her, well, you know, tell me about Ramsay. You know, you keep saying you know Ramsay better than anyone. I don't know him. Tell me, what are your suggestions?
I know the way his mind works. I know how he likes to hurt people. Did it ever once occur to you that I might have some insight?
And all she kept saying was, don't do what he expects you to do. What does that mean? How is he supposed to work with that? So all he, yes, he made some crappy decisions as a battlefield commander during the battle. He did. There's no getting away from it. He let his heart, rule his head, and it lost him the battle. But Sansa getting on his case about, you're not listening to me, you're not asking me any questions, she's got no right to say that because she was sitting there while the guys were talking about the battle plan. She could have spoke up, she could have said anything, but she didn't. She sat there quietly, not saying anything. When the battle planning was over, everyone had left the room but Jon, and then she lashes into Jon about, you don't listen to me, you don't ask me questions. Yeah. Oh, it's just so frustrating. She is the cause of Jon losing that battle, as much as Jon himself is. So let's get to that. Obviously, Rickon has had... was there supposed to be some sort of impact from Rickon's death? Because I very much doubt anyone really felt it. He's been in this series once fleetingly in this season. And then he's not been around for about 2 seasons before that. So we've got no emotion, no connection to the character at all. Then Ramsay leads him out and then sends him running towards Jon and then starts shooting arrows at him.
Run to your brother. The sooner you make it to him, the sooner you get to see him again. Ready? Go.
So when he finally does die right in front of Jon, we feel the impact from Jon's point of view, not the impact of losing Rickon. We really couldn't probably care less about Rickon. In story sense, he is the heir to Winterfell, as far as they know, the last remaining true Stark, because they don't know about Bran. But it loses its impact. We feel sorry for Jon. He was almost there. He was right there, ready to save his brother, and Ramsay shoots that arrow right through his back. Rickon's dead. Jon goes mental and charges Ramsay's army on his own, which is exactly what Ramsay wanted. He played Jon like a fiddle. Perfect. He played him perfectly, and Jon fell into the trap. to make it worse, it left Davos in a position of, what do I do? If I don't send the army forward to support Jon, they kill Jon, we've lost our commander, it's going to dishearten all the troops. What do we do then? So he had no option but to send the men forward to support Jon, which obviously, as it turned out, saved Jon's life, as the two cavalry wings crashed together around him. That was a fantastic, amazing scene, but obviously, as I said at the beginning of this episode, the cinematography and the editing and the sound, it just puts you right in the middle of that battle. But once again, all Jon had then was, he was in the middle of a battle, he didn't know which way to look, he had men coming at him from all over the place, arrows firing down. Ramsay could afford to shoot arrows into his own men. His army was over twice as many strong as Jon's army. He could afford to lose the soldiers and still win the day. Jon couldn't. Jon needed every soldier that he had, and he was losing them at a really fast rate, which was why Davos, seeing the battle was turning against them, raced in with the archers, because he didn't have anything else to do. If he had stayed back with the archers, who couldn't shoot on their own men, then the army in front of him, his army in front of him, would have been totally wiped out, and then he would have been wiped out. So his only option left was to run in and try and support Jon and what was left of their infantry. But then we see, as when they're finally all together and Ramsay sends in the rest of his men, the shield bearers, we see very Roman tactics. I mean, I was watching it with my wife and I was saying to her, this is right out of ancient warfare. This is, the way they were fighting was just like the Romans did, or the ancient Greeks. Tall shields, long spears. It could have been a Greek phalanx or Roman centurions fighting on that field, the way they moved. And they totally surrounded, obviously, Jon's force, kept them all together, huddled in, they couldn't move, they couldn't get ready to fight. The shields were just a wall that they couldn't break through, even though Tormund tried a few times and almost got killed for it. And then slowly they start to squeeze, start moving in with the shields, moving with the spears, take a few steps, spear someone, pull back, wait, take a few steps, spear someone, pull back. It's perfect Roman tactics. It's just like the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal and the Romans met, and the Romans had like a 5-to-1 advantage over Hannibal, but they didn't have much in the way of cavalry. When Hannibal's cavalry had got rid of the Roman cavalry, and he basically just sucked the Roman forces into his army, he had basically had a flat battle line. The Romans attacked in one solid square of men, thinking they're just going to steamroll over them, and the line bent, sucking the Romans into the middle, and then he had them on three sides, and then he just squashed them. And that's exactly what Ramsay does. Perfect battlefield tactics. During the fighting, we see Jon being attacked from all sides by people on horsebacks, by infantry, by falling arrows. And he manages to get through all of it. It seems like every time he's about to be attacked, something will happen. A horse will barrel into the soldier who's about to attack him. A shower of arrows will come down, he'll hunch down, and they'll all avoid him for some reason. But it makes you think back to what Melisandre was saying to him when they were meeting the night before, when Jon asked her, "If I fall in this battle, please don't bring me back. I'm ordering you not to bring me back." And she was like, "I don't obey you. You're not my lord. I am the priestess of the Lord of the Light, and if he has a job for you, if he has a task for you, then I have to do what he tells me to do." And it makes you think, it does make you think, was Jon just incredibly lucky? Or was someone looking out for him? Was he getting help from above? There is that prophecy of that reborn Lord of the Light who's going to come with a flaming sword and save everyone. Jon has been put forward as a possibility of one of the people who could be that prophesized person. It's beginning to look more and more likely, maybe. It's either him or Daenerys. I don't know which one it's going to be, but it's got to be one of the two. if the prophecy is even true at all. But Melisandre did have an earlier vision of Jon fighting at Winterfell, and that's obviously come true. So I'm hoping that it might give us more confidence, because she was obviously losing her faith after Jon died and after Stannis died. I mean, yes, she brought Jon back, but after Stannis dying, when she was convinced that he was the Lord of the Light Reborn, shook her terribly. So I was hoping that seeing Jon at Winterfell, bringing him back, will give her back some more of her confidence. We're going to have to wait and see how that pans out. Obviously, next episode, Davos gets into her about burning Shireen at the stake. We're assuming he's doing that in front of Sansa and Jon. We don't see them, we just see him and Melisandre. But him finding that deer, that stag that he had crafted for Shireen in the remains of that fire, I didn't realise Stannis was actually that close to Winterfell. I thought he was miles away and had been bogged down in the snow, and Melisandre told him to sacrifice his daughter Shireen to melt the snow to let him get to Winterfell. But obviously he was already at Winterfell, because Davos didn't walk miles that night just to happen upon this fire, this old fire. So that was odd. But it was a nice scene where he picks it up and you get that beautiful sunrise behind him. But he now knows that Shireen is dead. Obviously Brienne, I believe, told him that she'd killed Stannis. So he's got nothing else to live for now other than what Jon can possibly do. I mean, I think to an extent Davos is starting to look at Jon like he did at Stannis. He loved Stannis. As he said in this episode, Stannis rose him up from nothing to a knight. Now Stannis is gone, who has he got to fight for? Well, Jon is a good person, an honourable person, and I think Davos sees that and wants to be a counsellor to Jon, to teach him, to bring him to his fulfilment, to make him the person, the leader that he can be. I really think that's why Davos is counselling him so well and being like the king's hand for him. Jon will probably never be a king. He could be king of the North, and Tommen's not going to sign off on it. So unless the North just part from the South again, have another rebellion like Robb Stark did, in which case they can just ignore those rules and perhaps, I don't know, Sansa or the other lords can say, you are now Jon Stark. We're going to call you Jon Stark. That's who you are. Could they have saved Rickon? Probably not. I mean, like Sansa said, Ramsay was always going to kill Rickon because he knew that Rickon was the heir of Winterfell. While Rickon was around, his claim to the castle and the lands was at risk. So he was going to kill him one way or another. Obviously, nobody guessed he was going to kill him the way he did. But what they could have done is send in a small commando force over the walls of Winterfell at night, find Rickon, and either get him out of the castle or hide him somewhere in the castle so Ramsay can't find him, in which case they'll keep him safe. Nobody knows Winterfell better than Jon and Sansa, so I'm sure it could have happened. Obviously, no one thought of that as an option. Well, although it was an incredible uplifting scene at the end where we see the Knights of the Vale appearing over that crest of the hill and charging down into the flanks, into the rear of the Bolton army, it was very Two Towers. It was very Charge of the Rohirrim. I mean, to the horn blowing, to the sudden appearance of the cavalry on the ridge top, to the sudden charge down into the enemy. It was almost taken blow from the Battle of Helm's Deep in the Two Towers of Lord of the Rings. But it was still a very good scene, and it gives you that uplifting end to the battle. Everyone really knew that Jon was going to win. One way or another, we knew he was going to be bowed out. Either the Knights of the Vale were going to turn up, which was like almost 100% surety that was going to happen, or some of the Starks Bannermen who had sided with Ramsay Bolton would perhaps turn on Ramsay. That was what I was hoping for. I was hoping the Umbers might change sides again and betray Ramsay, because I could never buy into the fact that they would side with him willingly. Even though they did and brought him Rickon, there was no reason for it, because the Umbers had always been such solid supporters of the Starks. The Karstarks, fine, because, you know, their dad had been beheaded by Robb. But the Umbers, I don't know. So what's going to happen to them now? The survivors, assuming, well, Small John Umber got killed by Tormund, so there's no reason to worry about him. But what will the Umber and Karstark forces do? Will they side with Jon and Sansa now Winterfell has been taken? Will they fight them? Will the North finally all come together behind Jon and Sansa? But there is no Stark. She is Lady Bolton and he is Jon Snow. So who do they rally behind? That's why I'm thinking somebody's got to make Jon a Stark. Somehow. Or Bran's going to turn up. But like I say, that's not going to happen until next season, because he isn't even at the wall yet. And he's got to get past the wall. Will the mark on his arm bring the wall down, or allow the Night's King to get past the wall? That's all going to happen next season. So right now, they've got Winterfell back. Yes. They've got their own small force, what's left of it. Yes. Will the Knights of the Vale hang around? Maybe, but why would they really? They've done what they came to do. Can Baelish convince Robin to allow his army to hang there at Winterfell? Who's going to feed them? I mean, it's winter. Where are they going to get all the supplies from? My guess would be that they'll probably try and rally the north while the Knights of the Vale head back south. But I think if that happens, then time is seriously running out for the Freys, because they've got to be next on the hit list. Now they've killed Bolton, they've killed Ramsay Bolton, they've wiped him out, they've got Winterfell back. Get the north on side somehow, and then deal with the Freys, because they're next south. Heading south, they're next, then it's River Run, then it's King's Landing. So you've got to think that the Freys are about ready to be taken down next. And let's face it, we all want to see that as much as we wanted to see Ramsay die. And Ramsay died in an absolutely perfect way, killed by his own dogs. There are a number of other ways he could have gone. Sansa could have stabbed him, somebody could have betrayed him and knifed him, Jon could have taken him out. Jon almost did take him out. But the way Sansa finished him off, locked in a cage with his dogs, who he hadn't fed for 7 days, as he admitted. Although how she actually knew, how did she know that? Because, okay, in that scene, before the battle, the day before the battle where they're meeting, Sansa says, "You're going to die tomorrow, Lord Bolton, see you in the morning," turns around and gallopes off. She's gone. And then Ramsay Bolton says to Jon and Davos and Tormund, you know, I haven't fed my dogs for 7 days, they're very hungry, I wonder what bits of you they're going to eat next. So Sansa wasn't there when Ramsay said that. And it's not exactly the sort of thing that Jon's going to go back and meet Sansa and go, oh, by the way, Ramsay said he hadn't fed his dogs for the last 7 days, so they're very, very hungry. That's not going to happen. That wouldn't have happened at all. So she wasn't actually there to hear Ramsay say that. So for her to say, well, you actually stated yourself that you hadn't fed your dogs for 7 days, so they're starving. Well, no, he didn't actually say that to you, Sansa, so you wouldn't have known that. But anyway, it was still poetic justice that his pack of loyal hounds were the ones that finished him off.
Stop! Down!
And the way Sansa starts to turn away and then checks herself and looks back and watches him die before she turns and walks away, and then finally you get that small smile just as it comes to an end. She has come a long way. So that's why I'm wondering whether she's perhaps becoming well, not worried. I mean, I don't think she's going to go the way of Cersei, but she could be certainly becoming more like her mother, Catelyn. And Catelyn would have had the strength to do exactly that. So Sansa's becoming a very strong woman now. But which way she's going to go? We've still got another 2 seasons of 6 episodes. We've got another 13 episodes to go in total. So she's got a little bit of time to grow, but it's all going to be quickly coming together now. Everything's going to be coming to a head. Because when you think about it, when you consider that a normal season is 10 episodes, and we've now got 2 seasons left, a total of 13 episodes, it's not a lot of time to get all of this sorted out. So what do we think is going to happen next week? Well, as I said, we saw Davos and Melisandre having a bit of an argument. I think it's all going to be pretty much King's Landing next week, the trial at last. We get to see what's going to happen on that. I'm still betting that Cersei's going to try and blow something up with a wildfire. I mean, Tyrion, once again, this episode dropped a few lines about how, when he was talking to Daenerys and he was reminding her that her father, the Mad King, tried to blow up King's Landing and the Scepter Baelor and the Red Keep by using all the wildfire. So they keep dropping in these hints, prophecies that you see Bran seeing flashes of images, and then Tyrion dropping lines like that. That rumour that Qyburn mentioned last episode to Cersei, it's got to be that. It's got to be. And I think if she does try and do it, like I say, Tommen's toast. I think Tommen's toast. She's killed her final kid, as was prophesied that she would outlive all of her children. Jaime's going to find out that she killed him, whether it's an accident or not. He will break away from her and head north. That's my prediction. What will happen is anyone's guess, especially when Daenerys comes over to Westeros. And again, I'm assuming that she's going to land at dawn, where I'm thinking Varys is headed to make some inroads in the diplomacy there to allow Daenerys' army to land at Westeros, somewhere safe, so they can gather before they head to King's Landing to take out the Lannisters. Whew, what an episode. Okay, well, next week's episode is a lot to live up for. It's not going to be as big as this. I think HBO used all of their money from this season on this one episode, which would explain why we've had a couple of cheap episodes down the line, a couple of teases and promises of big events that we never got. Everyone was saying they were saving up their money for something, and would they deliver? Well, they certainly delivered. So, I will forgive them for perhaps giving us a slightly weak 6th season, because they gave us a fantastic 9th episode. What will the 10th episode be like? Tune in next week and I'll let you know if you don't watch it before me. You guys take care. And if you enjoyed this recap, please share it on your Facebook page or subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you later.